friends, and thank you for tuning into Weird Mythic Podcast. I hope everybody has had a great weekend. It is Sunday. I said I'll get this out Sunday. I never said when, but I'm recording and editing just the way things happen. Um, I've had a lot going on the last few months. I've had to find a new job, which I did about 3 weeks ago. Yeah, about 3 weeks ago now, and it's been going great. I'm really hoping that being part of a small family run business is the kind of the job or career change that I need right now. Instead of working for a big corporation that, have big turnovers, no matter how great I am at my job, because I'm a great worker or employee, I guess. Also just have changes in life, family, love, all that good stuff. And I'm always going back and forth from my hometown and doing things on weekends. I'm always watching my brother's kiddos because they are amazing and I love them and I love being part of their life when they're growing up. And it's hard in the summer because they, have school off. So I try to go down there to also help with childcare stuff. So I've been a little bit distracted to say the least. Oh, also, you guys know I have my cat. And he went deaf all of a sudden a few months ago. I don't know if I mentioned that. And he has lost a little bit of weight because I would usually get up in the morning and do my little cat call, and Louie would come a running from anywhere and just eat whatever. Now I have to go look for him in the morning because he's outside. And I find him and he follows me back and he eats some and then he gets distracted. It's just a pain in the ass, but I finally found a food that he really likes. He's been eating the hell out of it, so thank God for that. But I've never had a deaf animal before, so you know, it's very interesting to figure out those dynamics. I also just wanted to add that I went to a concert last night. And oh my gosh, it was such a fucking blast. I went with Christina, of course. Amazing. Uh, we went and saw Tears for Fears, shout, shout, let it all out. Oh my gosh. They let out a new album and it is they did mainly newer songs from their album. And of course, they did that. Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Mad World, all that stuff. I am such a big fan now. They did such a great job, and I'm sorry if my voice seems a little off every now and then, but I was having fun, drinking, dancing, singing. Great time. So there's that, along with everything else that I have been distracted with. But with everything going on, I love doing the podcast, and I appreciate people knowing that I'm not as consistent, which days it's coming out. I am happy it's Sunday though, and it's starting to become a new month. It's the end of whatever month this is. It's almost August, June, July. Yeah, it's at the end of July, and August is coming up in just a couple days. So maybe I'll just start doing the Sunday thing again. I'm trying to find a day that works best. Still kind of hard for me to do that, but I always get my shows out once a week. So it will come out. Just don't know exactly which day. But I'll always be doing my research and I love making myself a deadline because then I feel super accomplished when I get it out. Like I will tonight. I'll work late, get this out, by 11 o'clock, possibly tonight. It's only what, 5 o'clock now? What is the time? I don't even know. It is 4:49 on a Sunday. I'll get this out soon. But let me go ahead and get into the episode. It is episode 69. And because it is, the 69th episode, everybody's favorite number. Funny story. When my grandpa turned 69, I was a real young kid and they had a party. I remember my grandpa saying it's his favorite number, and I just did not understand the joke. And there's a few of us kids. We're like, oh, why is everybody laughing that it's grandpa's favorite number? Whatever. It wasn't until I was much older that I'm like, oh, gross. But it's hilarious. But in celebration of episode 69, let's go ahead, and I thought it was just fitting to cover succubi and incubi, the succubus and incubus sex demons. Really wanted to just go ahead and let's talk about it. Why not? It'll be fun. Succubus and incubus. Both of them are demons and they do have evil intent toward their victims. A succubus is the female form who will only attack men, and the incubus is the male form who will only attack women. They both take energy from their victims using sexual activity against their prey. During the experience, the man or woman will more than likely enjoy themselves and enjoy the experience, honestly, in that moment. But then after, they feel very lethargic and a little bit confused after the encounter with the succubus or incubus. They also only attack their victims at night and while they are asleep or like in that trying to fall asleep stage. Like you're laying down, you're finally relaxed, and you can really feel yourself drifting off. And that's when they will make their attack. These sex demons are always beautiful and appealing to the eye till you really start to look close, and then they might have some bird feet or a snake-like tail. But usually people just talk about how beautiful their face is. In the 14th century England was probably around the first time the word succubus was actually used. And in Jewish culture, it was believed that the succubus needed the semen from a human man to survive. That the succubus will collect the semen, then give it to the incubus to then impregnate a human woman. Since demons themselves cannot reproduce, this was kind of like a loophole for demons for them to reproduce. But the children that were born from these demons were either deformed, a demon themselves, maybe a witch, and just flat out more susceptible to supernatural forces. It's just odd. Medieval England believed that if you go down like some cunnilingus on the succubus, her vulva will drip urine and other fluids. In my head, I'm like, so she squirts? That's just how, I guess that's taboo against the church, right? It was said that succubi are forcing men to perform cunnilingus, and that the repeated sexual activity will lead a man to become physically and mentally ill, or a succubus could just kill the man. I mean, they are only needed for the semen, or anyways, right? In Judaism and Christianity, it is believed that the succubus and incubus are descendants from Lilith, who was Adam's first wife in the Garden of Eden. Apparently, Lilith left Adam because she didn't want to be obedient to God or Adam. She actually went off and had sex with the archangel Samael. Lilith is blamed for diseases on men and causing men to wander around at night and defiling themselves. In Judaism, in the Zoharistic Kabbalah, there are 4 different succubi that had sex with the archangel Samael. Their names were Lilith, Iseth Zunimin, Argat Batmala, and Naama. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced any of those names. All of the succubi had children, but Lilith's children were called Lilin and were hostile spirits that attacked men in ancient Mesopotamia. King James of Scotland, and he was also King of England at a point, he lived from 1566 to 1625. In his dissertation, he wrote about how angelic entities cannot reproduce and believed that the devil had 2 methods of getting a human woman pregnant. 1, he would steal the sperm from a dead man and put it into a living woman. Or the devil would take his demons or himself, possess a dead body to then have sex with a woman, which is really gross. But that's what they believe in that. Anyways, I found this book called Witch's Hammer, and it is by a man named Heinrich Kramer, and this was written in 1486. Heinrich talks about how women are to blame for his lust. The book talks about how evil witchcraft is, and those who practice should be tortured and die, burned alive to be exact. His book was not accepted by the church, and he was dismissed by a bishop for being a bit crazy, but you could see how witchcraft and succubi were really big in the 1400s. Now, to my surprise and ignorance, there are multiple cultures across the world that believe in succubi or incubi. Although they might not have the same name, it is the same type of creature or the same type of demon. Arabic folklore states that jinns were thought to have been responsible to sex acts while a person is asleep. And we've talked about jinns before. They're kind of like a genie, but not really. Like they could pretty much grant you a wish, but they always take something else. In Africa, this type of demon will have encounters with men while they are asleep. The men are very tired and don't do much of anything after the encounter. They're just pretty much down for the count when they wake up, like they've been sick. In Zanzibar, the demon Popobawa, which is a type of shapeshifter that is said to have sexual encounters with people. The Popobawa, although usually attacking a household, will sometimes seek out one family member to attack, and in some cases, the attack is like that of a succubus. In Hungarian culture, they have the liturg, which does have 3 different types, but we're only going to focus on the one for this episode, of course. The liturg is a satanic lover. They fly at night and appear like a ball of light, and they're sometimes compared to seeing the will-o'-the-wisp. Liturgs will enter a home through a fireplace or keyholes and bring sickness into the home. And a lot of that will have to do with seeking one person out and having a grasp on them. And they will have, like I said, they're satanic lovers, so there's that type of grasp on somebody. In Sweden, a Mara is a goblin or a spirit that will sit on top of you while you are asleep. They then give you nightmares. Now this is, okay. There is this famous painting that I have seen multiple times, and I think it is a woman just lying on a bed, and it's like medieval times, and there's this weird goblin that is sitting, like squatting on her chest and like staring out like at the painter. And that is what this is. I never knew what that. I just thought it was some weird demon, but that is what this is, a Mara. So I'll post that on my Instagram. Maybe I'll put a little caption underneath it to say when it came out and all that. But when I read that description, all I could think of was that painting. In Turkish culture, they have the Karabasan. This is also called Batsy or Basti, Basty, and there are multiple of them. But of course, we're only going to talk about the one, which is the Al-Basti, which is a tall and evil naked female. Well, it looks female at least, but evil and tries to get you. Now, if you haven't noticed, one of my favorite like cultures and type of folklore is Indian and India, whether that be Hindu, Sikh, or Buddhism. I love it all. And they have the Yakshini, and they provide all gratification to the senses. They have the power to delight the body, and there are 36 different types of Yakshinis that are described in the Tantras, and each of them fulfill different desires. The Yakshinis are always young, beautiful, and powerful. I did find this Chinese Buddhism book, and it had this interesting passage. Now, I did not read the full book, but I do have it in the show notes if you want to read the full book. But I found a passage in an article and then found the book. And this is what the passage says. You will not be attacked by demons who either suck your energy or make love to you in your dreams, unquote. Now, I don't have the exact context for that passage either, but it is a book about Buddhism and how it changed throughout China when China was introduced to Buddhism. And that passage, to me, it reads a lot like a succubus, like warning. And through this type of Buddhism, you will not suffer from that demon any longer. A lot of the first known encounters with incubi and succubi were from the medieval Europe. And while I was looking into that, I learned that the wizard Merlin, yeah, like Sword in the Stone from Disney, King Arthur, all that shit. Merlin was born from a woman and an incubus hooking up. Yeah, that's how Merlin got his powers. And yeah, he got it all from his daddy. Had no clue that his dad was a succubus. That was really interesting. I was like, no way. I don't remember where I read it. And then I had to do other research. I was like, shit, I'm dumb. I also came across 2 different case studies on people or patients who had symptoms of succubus and incubus attacks. The case studies were studying how this type of phenomena is associated or it could be a side effect of sleep paralysis and or schizophrenia. Now I'm going to save those till the end, and I'm going to kind of switch gears at this moment and kind of talk about like actual documented cases of these attacks. I also didn't exactly write down like everything for those case studies. I just have my notes because I don't want to read a whole case study, but wanted to get into like firsthand accounts and some real documented shit of these attacks. In a book by Hector Boethius and Jerome Cardan, they both kept records of supernatural occurrences that happened to them or happened to people around them. This book was out in 1577, but they talk about this encounter of a succubus from 1480. There is this ship that they were on, and it was leaving Scotland. Didn't write where they were going, sorry guys. But as they're on this ship leaving Scotland, a summer storm hit. The ship was fine after the short storm, which I think is called a squall. Don't quote me on that though. The ship's crew went about, the ship, checking on the passengers, checking on the ship, make sure nothing was broken or needed to be patched up, make sure everybody was okay. And under one of the hatches of the boat, a woman was just yelling and screaming, and she was yelling at the crew members. She was saying how she wanted to be thrown over the ship and just being really hysterical. There was also this priest on the ship, and he went over to console the woman. She began telling the priest how her husband has been visited daily by a spirit, and the woman felt that she needed to repent for her own sins so that her husband wouldn't be visited by this spirit any longer. She was praying, she was crying for her husband at this point, just talking to the priest, and the crewmen are like, fuck. So the priest, the crew members followed the woman back down to like where her and her husband were staying downstairs. And as they got closer to the bedroom, they could like smell something, just something awful and rotten. The woman opens the door to the room, and this giant black cloud that was making noises as if there was flames in the room, but there was no flames. It was just this giant black cloud. Once they opened the door fully, this cloud came burling out of the room and went up the stairs and went into the ocean. Yeah, that was really the end of that one. However, this strange black cloud appears again in their book. There was this young woman whose family was trying to get her to marry somebody. They had all kinds of suitors, men well off, but the woman just straight up refused and did not even want to see them. She was already in love. The thing she was in love with was a, quote, foul, monstrous thing, very horrible to behold, unquote. They called it deformed, and the woman wanted to be with it. The family brought a priest over to the home, and he started to read from the Gospel of St. John. And then this wicked spirit made a terrible noise and flew up in the air and out of the home. This thing went right through the ceiling and caused damage. And once this thing left, the woman's bed straight up caught fire. There is a French philosopher, John Bodin. He wrote in his book Edmond May in 1580. He wrote about this woman named Joan Hervilleria. Joan. She married Beelzebub at the age of 12. And Joan's mother actually helped with this marriage ceremony. It was pretty much the ordained minister. But it was all for the devil or Beelzebub to, yeah, exactly. 12-year-old, 1580s, crazy shit. There's also this story of a nun Magdalena Crucia of Cordova. She was also considered saintly by the church. But at some point, her fellow sisters and nuns started to suspect something about her miracles and her ability to always talk to God. Magdalena went to the Pope John III, for a confession. This confession was that the devil came to her at age 12. Again, age 12 comes up. And they slept together. And they continued to have sexual relationships for the next 30 years. Yeah. A nun. Historian Hector Boethius wrote about the history of Scotland in 1527. He wrote about a young man who had a visit from a female demon pursuing him to marry her. This young man was very devout and went to his local bishop, The bishop told the young man to pray, confess all of your sins, and fast for a few days. That seemed to help. The female demon just kind of left him alone after that. Then there's this guy, Pierre de Lancre, aka the French judge of Bordeaux, whatever, in 1582. He was a massive witch hunter. Not like Van Helsing, but like someone in the church who demonized everything that he believes to be sinful. Took a lot of things from the Bible a bit too literally. In my humble opinion, that is. Anyways, Pierre wrote books on witchcraft and sexual relations during the Sabbath. He believed that Satan had sex with a single woman, like single as in, nobody's with her, but he preferred to be with married women. He also wrote about an Egyptian blacksmith who was working late into the night when a demon appeared to him and as a beautiful woman. The blacksmith was startled and threw his hot iron at the demon, and it disappeared right in front of him. Now, he didn't throw this hot iron at somebody and they fell back and whatever. No, this demon straight up evaporated in front of the blacksmith. And we have discussed how iron before is deadly to like fairies and demons, so it doesn't surprise me that it came up this time. Let's get into something a little bit more current, shall we? In an unexplained mysteries thread, like the show, they have like their online threads, commenter wrote about his experiences with the succubus. 2007, this man was visited and kept awake for 3 nights in a row by a seductive force. He remembers being awake, but in some sort of like dream state or fuzzy-headedness. And there was this woman that he knew was there, but he just really couldn't see her. They had sex, and to him, it was an amazing experience. As the days went on, he started to see her more and more, like more visible as the days went on, and they kept having this, this experience. Her eyes, he would describe, looked like stars, and he felt as if they went to another world. When he looked into them, like they went to a different universe, and he was just like entranced by them. He could also smell her, but the smells didn't remind him of anything specific, more like all the wonderful smells in the world all at once. He felt no guilt or darkness or even really lust with her. He just really enjoyed the company, and they both seemed to have fun together. Now, he didn't climax at first in the beginning, he says. He started to have like visions near the end of this 3 days of Christ, and he was super confused on why, and then came that 3rd night, and that was the end of it. Another commenter on Unexplained Mysteries, in 2010, there was this guy who was just having a normal night at the start, when all of a sudden he had like this tightness in his chest, and he felt this tightness move to his stomach. He didn't really see anything, but he felt a gentle touch on his legs. Then he felt like he was just floating. Then this intense sexual feeling of vibrations through his whole body. He felt hands all over him and a pressure on his legs. This vibration was great, and he was enjoying it, although it was a bit odd. He wrote that he never saw a female touching him, but he felt like there was a female on him. In another article I found, December 2012, man from Bakersfield, California, his name is Ethan. He had an experience. He was at school all day, goes home, starts doing his homework, ends up falling asleep at some point while working, but he ended up having a nightmare. An evil being was trying to break into his room in this nightmare. And when this thing finally broke into his room, Ethan woke up from the nightmare. But he had this loud ringing in his ears. And then he remembers a feeling of a demon behind his head holding him down. He felt a vibration in his ear again with this vibration, and it spread to his other ear. He tried to get up out of bed, but was being held down by this demon. Then he heard laughing in his ear. Before letting Ethan go, the demon screamed one word at him. Soon. Ethan then jumped out of the bed with the quickness, ran to his lights and turned them on, but he didn't see anything in the room. But he heard his dogs whining and scratching at the bedroom door, opens the door, lets them run inside. Ethan goes to his bathroom and wash his face, what the fuck just happened? As he looks in the mirror, he notices his eyes are completely bloodshot. He has not had the same experience since. I found a YouTube video about a man who decided to direct this movie out of his own experience. It'll be in the show notes. He had a family member who was suffering from a succubus attachment. He and another family member went to visit the one that was being attacked. They actually wanted to try and exorcise it. I think this was somewhere in India, but it wasn't specified, or I didn't read too much into it. But when they got to the home, everyone's just kind of chilling, catching up, and all of a sudden the family member that has the attachment begins to kind of sway back and forth, and they see that he has this glazed over look in his eyes. Then he gets up, just slowly walks to his bedroom without saying a word to the other two family members who are there to help. The director and the other family member who wants to help follow the one with attachment back to the bedroom. And they start to hear words quote, "he is mine," unquote. As his family member starts to cry, this is happening. And the man would cry and gently touch his own face and caress himself. The other two then went to him and started to talk to the succubus or this demon, saying, "Let my family member go, leave him alone, stop attacking him." And I guess he just sat there and talked to the succubus and pretty much told it to leave. A few hours later, his family member seemed to that glazed look went away and he seemed to look better. His eyes started to focus, and it actually looked like, according to the man who directed this movie, that he just had a really great and well-rested nap. The video is just very interesting to hear from this director's point of view. It's really sad when he talks about how he just wanted to help this family member being better. It was very interesting. I recommend you guys watch it. It's a little over half hour. It's super interesting. As I was on YouTube, I found another one of a man telling his first experience with the succubus. And he starts off by saying that he is a Christian and that he does pray every night before going to bed. He also says that this night of the attack, he did take some NyQuil because he was having trouble falling asleep the last few nights, and usually NyQuil helps him. This night, he is home alone in his apartment, laying down, trying to get to sleep, but having a hard time still getting there. And he sleeps on his stomach. So just picture that. Dude sleeping on his stomach. He finally starts to fall asleep when he's hearing what sounds like footsteps coming down his hallway, coming into the direction of his bedroom. He stayed asleep, just listening, believing it was in his dream or all in his head. He then heard the footsteps stop at the foot of his bed. He now is really starting to fall asleep when he had this strange muscle spasm in his leg and the same type of spasm in his arm. This man then felt as if somebody or something had grabbed his blanket and slowly started to pull it off of him. This is when he rolls over and opens his eyes. Now he doesn't see anything, but he does see that the blanket was pulled and moved over. He lays back down on his stomach, starts to drift off a little bit into dreamland when the blanket starts to move off his arm again. This time, it was followed by the feeling of someone gently caressing and resting their hands on his back. He fell asleep. But at some point in the middle of the night, he was lifted out of bed and pulled onto somebody, jerked out of his bed, and then seeing this woman pulling him on top of her. He was very much in disbelief when he woke up being pulled onto somebody. He knew he wasn't dreaming and something was very wrong. Now he admits he did second guess himself. She was a very pretty woman and she's offering her something. I never know. But he knew something was wrong and backed up. The woman then forced herself on top of him, but then she disappeared. Now the man talks about how he just kind of looks around his room and he's super confused, but he's like, okay, somehow gets back to sleep. Now he starts to dream again. and he's dreaming of himself in his own bedroom. But someone else was there. He noticed two women in his doorway. He gets up in his dream and asks the women, what is going on? He addresses them by asking who they are. And one of the women answers that they are following Horus. He then answered them by saying he prays to God. Remember, he prays every night. He's very Christian. Then the next thing he remembers from the dream is one of the women left, and then he woke up. The man then slept the rest of the night without any interruptions. He Googles who Horus is the next day, and dreams like he had, but he can't really find anything except for the fact that it's a succubus. Now, I try to look up who Horus is also, and I think I don't have it written down, but it was like some type of philosopher. I don't understand what that would have to do with it, but I mean, he tried to look up something too. So you guys need to go to weirdmythicpodcast@gmail.com and send me your own Succubus and Incubus stories. Now, I told you I found some case studies. Okay. Now, these case studies there's two. And the first one is a couple of females and the others some males. But really, what I have found by doing the research on the succubus and incubus is that a lot of psychologists believe that the succubi phenomena could be linked to sleep paralysis and hypnopompic and hypnagogic hallucinations, which those the hypnagogic or hypnagogic hallucinations is like the sensation of something, like you feel it, like it's like something's touching you and you feel it. It is happening. So these case studies were based on those. So the first case study I'm going to do is actually on two men that have schizophrenia and succubus experiences. Now, the first one is this 18-year-old man. He's from middle-class family, no real family history of mental illness, but he kind of had a grocery list of issues. And for the last 3 years, he was having delusions, auditory hallucinations, and they were kind of like commanding and discussing type, plus a few others. He experienced someone having sex with him against his will. He was very distressed coming into this case study. He described that when he would lay down to go to sleep, he could feel the sensation of a female touching him. And he described her as this good-looking woman. He could feel her touch his penis, which gave him this, boner, and he ejaculated. Told the doctors that no, he did not want this experience. He didn't like the feeling of having sex with somebody who he didn't know. And after having these experiences, he would get out of bed and just be afraid of everything. And he started to think that there is this witch doing it to him. Remember, he has schizophrenia or those type of tendencies also. Now, the doctors considered schizophrenia as a diagnosis, but really didn't. They gave him some medication, and this actually made those experiences go away or at least become less frequent. The other man who did this case study was 24 years old. He was also a stoner. For the last 2 years, he was having delusions and auditory and tactile hallucinations. He described that he had voices in his head to the doctors. One of the voices was a teacher who was female, who would tell him how much she was in love with him. Often, he would get a sensation in his legs and his groin, and then he would hear the teacher telling him that she was the one responsible for those feelings. And then she would tell him how she was in love with him, wanted to be with him, and wanted to have sex with him. He would then feel his penis being touched and would come on occasion, like ejaculate. He was convinced that the teacher was doing this to him, even though she was not physically there. His body was under the control of the teacher who forced him into the sexual activity. Because of this, he actually stopped going to school. He also smoked a lot of weed during this. In the case study, they kept saying he smoked a lot of weed. And the doctors actually diagnosed this man with schizophrenia and cannabis dependency. They gave him 4 different medications, and this showed major improvement on the hallucinations. And he did acknowledge that after taking the medication that his experiences were all symptoms of schizophrenia. So the case study of those 2 men definitely show that their schizophrenia, their delusions, they acknowledge that this really wasn't happening to them. However, both of them were adamant that this was happening. They felt these things happen. They had this experience. And how scary to be like, what the fuck is happening to me? So again, medical literature is believing that the succubus and incubus phenomenon is a feature of sleep paralysis and the hypnagogic hallucinations. It's also a cause or something that has to do with probably night terrors, or the feeling of someone standing or sitting on your chest is another thing that'll happen. So I have another case study, and where did I go? Here it is. So this one was a bit different. I don't have as much detail as I did with the other one because it was very long and it was on 3 women, specifically in India. I really wish I had the date for this. It was recent, like very recent. So there was this thing going on in India years ago about multiple people having an experience with an incubus or succubus. So these 3 women, there was a 45-year-old, 35-year-old, and 39-year-old. They also called it the phantom lover syndrome, and all of them experienced what is called erotomania, which is a person has a belief that someone known or unknown person is intensely in love with them. Now, this case study was kind of like the men's, except it was more in like a sleep paralysis type of thing. So not them having schizophrenia, but it was more just the sleep paralysis. And they didn't take any medication. It was more just a therapy-based case study. So I don't know. What do you guys think? I've talked about demons before. I've talked about ghosts before. And even some like shapeshifters and cryptids, they have like these sensations where they can touch people and how eerie it can be. And like sleep paralysis, which happens when you're trying to wake up from sleep, the incubus and succubus experiences happen when you're trying to fall asleep. So it's when you're trying to get to sleep and maybe you're halfway there and then something awakes you. So it's almost like the opposite of what I would have considered like sleep paralysis, or you would have either the experience of a succubus and incubus, or you would have the experience of like the Hat Man, because that's when you're waking up, or in the middle of the night you wake up and your body can't move. But when you're falling asleep, you still have those sensations and moving, and you know you're trying to fall asleep. And that's when the succubus and incubus will attack. So please go to all of my social media, Weird Mythic Podcast on Twitter, Weird Mythic Podcast on Instagram, which, by the way, now that I think about it, has nothing to do with social media, but I just remembered my last episode, Billy Whack. I think what did I call it in a couple of episodes, or a couple of times in the last episode? I'm going to have to correct myself because I hate that. But I did say Billy Wick instead of Billy Whack. That's what it was. Just a couple times. It was the Billy Whack. I know, I heard myself. I said it wrong. Whatever. But again, guys, let me know what you think about this, the succubus and incubus demons. If you know of any other sex demons, happy episode 69, everybody. Again, go to Weird Mythic Podcast on Twitter, Weird Mythic Podcast on Instagram, which has my link tree, goes to my website and my merch store. Go to Weird Mythic Podcast on YouTube. And if you haven't noticed, I put up at least 2 videos now, maybe 3 at this point, on TikTok. I'm trying to get into that, post more videos on there and on Twitter, but I am Weird Mythic on TikTok. Also, send me an encounter or a story or a suggestion on a show, or even just feedback on the show. Anything, help me out. Send it my way. weirdmythicpodcast@gmail.com. Again, thank you for tuning in. Go to weirdmythicpodcast@gmail.com. Bye.